for some League of Legends.
Absolutely that, and these are the last chance qualifiers. So as we've mentioned before, we've had the group stage, we've been through that, so some teams have automatically qualified to the playoffs based on those standings, but now is the time to make it into playoffs if you haven't managed to do so already.
And for some of these teams that we've got coming at you today, you might recognise faces if you have been paying diligent attention to all of our UEM action, as we have got a couple returning ones. We'll talk about them in a little bit time, but where do you want to hit on first? Because we've got a lot to go through.
Exactly that. Before we get into any of the teams and the matches for today, we're going to bring us to the prize pool for the entire tournament, which is a grand total of €14,500.
This graphic gets me every time, whenever it just pops up on the screen, and it just makes me think, damn, what are Kit gonna do when they spend the money this time around?
That is a good point. They've been the reigning champions for some time now, and we'll see whether somebody can put an end to their reign and how it might be one of the teams coming in through these last chance qualifiers.
As we have got a lot of them currently looking for those last 4 spots in the playoffs. To just put a bit of context behind that joke that I threw out there, Kit SC White won the last 2 tournaments, not dropping a single game in one of them. So, competition is high. They are currently in the tournament again, haven't dropped a game yet. They won't be taking part in the last chance qualifier, as you might infer from that. But a lot of these teams are looking to fight their way back for another chance at it.
Exactly, Kit is kind of the raid boss almost, but we're going to bring it to the roadmap to see at which point they might be defeated, because right now we have the last chance qualifiers of today and tomorrow, and then the playoffs will begin starting from next week on the 21st of May.
So we've got today and tomorrow pretty much a speed run of our little double bracket last chance qualifier. Like I said, the top 4 teams are going to be the ones joining those dominant ones up in the playoffs that will be taking part for the rest of the tournament, leading into those finals that I am really excited for, because one way we get to see a team challenge Kit, another way we get a completely fresh finals. Both amazing results.
Exactly that. One down. I mean, I guess that both will win the narrative. You know, University Esports Masters bringing the best of what Europe has to offer, and here they are for the last chance qualifiers. We have a few teams from a variety of different countries. Roma Bruder from Germany, Uter Pessigol coming back from the groups, likewise with BME, a big cool from France, then H2B from Belgium, then Yeno Mesler, TUD Apes Primal, UPC Apples, AZSAGH, again coming in from groups, if I'm not mistaken, 02, Stuba, DSA, KTU, and finally DMU T1.
And for the teams we're guaranteed going to be bringing you today, we have got a couple of the ones on your screen. I'm particularly excited to see what we're going to get from some of those ones that we expected fancy things from. As you can see, we have got right now BME versus DMU T1 kicking off with the first one, BME returning from our initial group stage, and then DMU making their way in as the UK representatives. And now, that's what we got coming up first, followed by Pessigod taking on one of 2 teams. We'll have to see based on who actually wins in those matchups.
Yeah, there's a lot of underlying best of threes that are going on behind the scenes. We are only broadcasting the upper bracket here, so every single match in this sort of is mattering when it comes to who is going to end up getting the qualification. Here is the bracket for all of you at home watching, and as you can see there, we have the DMU BME there in the first part of the upper bracket, and so on and so forth.
So we will be taking a bit of a skim here, there, and everywhere, getting a rough idea of the power of both sides of the bracket, which is going to be good, as we know that the bottom side, at least with our first matchup and the second one, will be really indicative to see what we're actually expecting from these last chance qualifier teams, especially as I think now we can start to talk a little bit more about the teams that we have seen before. A lot of heavy improvements from BME Hungary. We're looking to see what they can actually do differently. This team had a very mixed performance in the group stage. They finished out in 3rd place, joint with 0-2 in Group A. So I'm looking at this team to think, how are they going to become a bit more consistent?
That is the question to be answered, and we'll see in the best of 3 today. But what is worth saying is, yes, BME came 3rd, but given their performance within the group stage, they kind of dropped some games where you would expect them to not drop. And if they did actually perform consistently in those games, then we would have seen them make the tiebreaker for 2nd.
and that is the thing. We are currently in a best of 3 with them against DMU, and my eyes are squarely on the mid jungle of Sora and Hunty. These two players have shown high highs and just lukewarm performances. In the first game we saw of this team on stream, Hunty got their signature Sejuani, got a level 1 invade off with the team, Sora popped off on the Tristana, and it was the most devastating performance of the tournament, hands down. However, after that we saw them repeat against the same team, 0-2, get the same mid matchup of Tristana into Orianna, and just do nothing. It was just absurd watching this team go from complete heroes to zeros, and I want to see that the first game form. I want to see them being proactive, and that comes off of Hunty getting facilitating champions.
Exactly. It seems that whatever Hunty's on, the team kind of revolves around. But we're going to pan it to the other side of this matchup, which will be the DMU Team 1 coming from the UK. Now, DMU have had a bit of a shaky road to making it into LCQs, but I would say that they have developed coming from that.
They've definitely had a lot of time to get practice playing in both the NUL and the NSE for the UK League, and getting damn far in both of them, second place for the NUL and winning the NSE, moving on to qualify. They played a lot of best of series is the point I'm trying to make, so they should be coming in at least with a bit more of that hard and fast experience on more recent patches, because a reminder for everybody, we're on patch 12.8, the MSI patch, not live.
Yeah, so none of that Olaf, none of that Talia, and none of that Pike shenanigans going on, but instead we'll have the same thing that MSI have had, as Melvin Isle has mentioned, so the Swain is available, the Umbral Glaive stuff is available, and so forth.
For Umbral Glaive and a little bit of Pike, one of the things I want to point out is that we have seen some abstract stuff from DMU. In their first game of the NSE finals, they pulled out Taric Pike bot lane with Karthus mid. Now, Pike with Umbral Glaive is in a very good spot right now, especially pre-nerf. Karthus got buffed, I believe it was 2 patches ago, and then across the board, this squad actually looks very, very similar to that of BME. Both top laners usually left on an island, Coco for BME and then Spirit for DMU. Spirit normally takes a more of a tank role for the squad, whereas Coco has been going a lot of these independent champions like the Gwen, who can exist and really thrive if they're not being camped. Whereas mid-jungle, for DMU, Hope and Samjay, exact same story as Hunty Sora. They have pivoted the style of this whole team to be Snowball, Samjay and Hope as much as possible so they can protect their side laners.
And this is exactly what we're going to be watching out for in draft in time to come, and in the applications within the best of 3, is to see how both teams interact with this mid jungle and see how they want to draft it, how they want it to play around the rest of their team, because it's going to be crucial to the success of both sides.
As far as it goes, I'm not coming into this game with a particular favourite, especially because you haven't seen the form necessarily on this particular patch. It's always that kind of up in the air of, well, depending on how much BME wanted to do research, DMU have got a lot of recent VODs that you could go back and watch. I was having more than enough time. I could have been doing it for a day and a half if I wanted to. That's how many they've got just sat around at the moment. So there is a lot of footage that BME can take some very important information from, because when I was saying BME aren't the most consistent team, DMU definitely aren't setting themselves in stone there.
Yeah, neither teams have had a really solid, say, progression in terms of, oh, well, you know what, this is exactly what I'm going to bring to the game each time, and I'm going to perform to roughly the same level. There have been highs and lows, and that has been noticeable.
And that means that for me, my prediction is going to be 3 games. Don't know which way it's going yet, we'll need to see that based on the form of the players, but one of the champions that I think might actually show up, that's kind of been on the fringes of the meta, is Xerath. 3 players, I think I put up 4 fingers there, play Xerath in this game. We've got Sora for the mid lane of BME, and then the mid and support players for DMU, so it actually becomes a bit of a flex pick that could get a touch dangerous in the draft, especially if you have already built a very solid force to play around in the ADC and the jungle roles for DMU.
Yeah, and this is the sort of things that we'll likely see trying to be targeted. Something that is worth noting for BME as well is that, yes, we've been talking about these picks in particular, but as far as what I've seen from BME, and something that the team really likes to pride themselves on, is the fact that they're actually really versatile in draft,
Yeah.
being able to sport a variety of different champions. So yes, these are champions they might be better at or prefer, but that is by no means the only thing they're capable of playing.
You know, in Mario Kart, where you can race against your own ghost?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I'm feeling talking about both of these teams, because I have to mirror the exact same strengths for DMU. This team literally played Tarek Pipe bot lane and won the game. Admittedly, they got stomped in lane, not the point. But we have to look at the versatility of both of these squads. They will lock in whatever champion they feel is optimal, which means we should probably look a bit towards what the MSI meta has been to maybe get a bit of a picture of that. Wukong, recent rework into the jungle, very strong there and in the top lane, has had a bit of a mixed performance, but overall, it's very, very good. They can jump over walls now. It's a very important thing for a jungler to be able to get that map mobility. Other reworks we've got, Rengar up in the top lane.
Yes.
Another significant one that can be played in jungle, but go on, you can take it away for that one.
I mean, if you really want to bring it to Rengar, there have been inklings of the Ivern-Rengar synergy in whichever permutation it might be, being able to utilize those bushes more, and even in some cases being able to use Senna's own mist to provide that invisibility as a jump as well. And we have seen a bit of resurgence with Senna recently in combination with something like the Wukong, for example.
And it gives me a bit of hope, because one of the players of DMU goes by that name, Hope. Another name, I knew them as prior, was True Invis, and they bring some assassins to the table in the form of the Evelyn Kha'Zix as well in their recent finals. Maybe they've added Rengar to that repertoire as well. It would make sense with some of the styles that they have been coveted to play so well. I'm hoping we get to see it, because this Rengar pick, something that just hasn't really shown its face in comp. For obvious reason, they are very feast or famine, but if you are very good at them and you can show that proficiency off in a game, especially in what we expect to be a bloody battle both sides, then I imagine that you can really leave your mark on this series.
No, we keep going back to this mid-jungle, but it really is the pivotal element between this matchup. If we look at Hunty, Sejuani, Lee Sin, Trundle, Hecarim, these are very enabling junglers, and if we take a look at Rengar and what Rengar wants to do, maybe it is Hunty's job here to, let's say, take True Invis, or Hope in this case, more on, like straight on, in the sense that, okay, I'm going to go and counter gank, I'm going to try and match you with these proactive junglers.
Because when we're looking at some of the potential weaknesses, at least for DMU, it's when that mid jungle doesn't get ahead anymore. Now that they've pivoted the style to be focused around those two players, if they aren't ahead, and we saw it happen in the third game of their regional finals for the NSE, where they went for a level 1 invade, and the Anivia Hecarim on the enemy team was there to counter, and they got double killed in mid-jungle, and the game was just over from there. There wasn't really much coming back. It was still a competitive game, but when you're starting off with that card deficit, it means that it's just nigh impossible to come back from. So it makes me wonder what kind of style and how aggressive both of these teams are going to try and push the bucket in the early game, because you do not want to be the first one to make a mistake, especially when you have not only one but potentially 3 games to play against the same opposition.
But at the same time, you can't argue that in a best-of-3 format, let's say you go all in on aggression game 1, just to sort of get an idea of what your opponents are and how they want to do things. Maybe you can go for that. Maybe you can just go full balls to the wall and see how it goes, and then make the adjustment in game 2.
You have the window to do so. Would I recommend it? Hard to say. Depends how confident you're feeling. It is first thing on a Saturday, so I'm curious how awake all of these players are going to be and how readily they are going to be to make those hyperactive moves early. Maybe you can take advantage of the fact that this is the first game of the day for presumably all of these players. They might have got up a bit early and had some practice normals or rank games, whatever. But you have to remember that everybody is going to be coming into this one still relatively fresh-faced.
Absolutely, that. It is early on in the day, and stuff like mental, how warmed up you are, this all matters. But as we see the best-of-3 progress, definitely for the second match coming in today, I'm sure that will become less and less of a factor.
So, we've pretty much run it across the board, both of these teams. Talked about the important areas we will be looking out for is that mid-jungle matchup on both sides. Top lane is going to be likely an island. That just leaves the bottom lane. And the 2 players whose name we have not mentioned yet for BME are Shruki and Kiko. These 2 are pretty much the same as what I said about Coco, where they exist on their own little island in the bot lane. It's a bit harder to ignore that one, though. You really do need to be looking around for that dragon priority. So it's, I think, the secondary carry mechanism for BME, where if they're doing well, bot lane is fine. They're fine to just sit on an island and exist. They don't need to snowball ahead. They have that capability with a bit of help. But when you're looking across the board at Soxu and Didol, who we know will play whatever on earth they think is actually good, not necessarily normal champions, let's go with it in that polite way of saying it, it means that you've got a real bit of work cut out for you. What kind of safe champions are we going to look for? Potentially things like an early pick towards the Ezreal for Shruki to almost just enable their support to go off, do whatever you want. I'm just going to survive because this bot lane can go one of many, many ways, and there's no physical chance we can read it after just looking at match histories.
What is worth saying about Shruki and Kiko? Yes, they might be thrown off by what Sosu and Dido might be able to bring here, but Shruki is very proficient on these sorts of safe champions, like you say, the Ezreal, and also the Xayah in particular. Yes, the lethality build has been nerfed, but Crit is still in a very good spot right now. And one thing is, Shruki and Kiko have kind of been the consistent factors in a more inconsistent overall team. The bot lane has always kind of been there to do their thing, and they've managed to do that each game.
Completely agree with you on that one. So, 12.8. Not many other significant changes to this point other than those three main reworks we talked about earlier. You have Swain as well that is kind of lurking off onto the side. Not sure whether that's going to be picked. Yeah. Who knows? We'll see. They've kind of been a bit up in the air. They looked very strong for a few days, and then everybody just stopped practicing it as far as I can tell. And then for those significant nerfs, you talked about the Xayah. We've also got Jinx and the AP Kai'Sa variant also nerfed down to size. So it means that this bottom lane pool is wide open. We could potentially see the Soxu Twitch come out, their signature champion. On the other side, we know the fact that Shruki plays things like Veigar, so maybe we just completely ditch ADCs as a dead role. And now it just adds more and more questions. There's so much on the table that just can't be answered and can't be set up for, so we really do just need to put that laser focus on this first draft to see where these teams put their priorities.
Exactly that, and something that is worth remembering, we had that sort of bubble meta in groups with the Jinx Karma having this ridiculous presence and pick rate, and I imagine the same thing will happen when it comes to these LCQs, in that you kind of get bubble metas appearing in terms of, oh, well, you know what, in this best of three or in the entire tournament as a whole, we see a few champions get really prioritized and then other teams keep picking up on it and it keeps going and so on and so forth, and then by playoffs it'll be a completely different thing.
Exactly, and I am curious to see what exactly we are going to be getting, because when it comes to predicting like these early champions and early power picks, I think that another one that kind of just creeps into the picture is the Volibear in the jungle. It's something that we know Hunty really likes and helps them to snowball the game, but on the other side, it's one of the best just fill champions for any mid-jungle duo. No mid laners are really sitting there like, well, I don't want a Volibear. I don't want to get point and click ganked. If you're an assassin, obviously it's great. If you're a control mage, it helps you get your combos off. Anything else in between, it's probably going to be respectable, and it's something that we saw Hope also default to help snowball Samjay, so it's one of those champions that I'm expecting to be banned away. We've seen it pick up quite a bit of presence at MSI, not a massive amount compared to the Wukong, but I think that the utility and the ease of execution on a Volibear is invaluable in a first game of the day.
Absolutely, ease of execution, something that everyone loves to go back to, but it is definitely a factor when it comes to league compositions. Yes, you might have a winning composition, or you might have a composition that wins in the circumstances when you play it correctly, but if you can't play it correctly, then it's kind of a moot point, isn't it?
Exactly, and it was something we saw all the time in groups. There were many drafts where I went into it very confident saying that X team was going to win, and then we got about 20 minutes in, it's like, oh right,
nope.
They just painted a really pretty picture in draft and they can't execute on it, so what's the point? Like, you have all these tools, if you can't utilize them, then you're just going to lose to the better team. And I think that comes to the burden of almost the theory of what you're trying to do, and both of these squads, we've been building them up as they don't have champion pools. They just think whatever is correct for the game. They lock in the optimal champion, or the champion that feels right in that moment, which means a lot of these players aren't necessarily going to be super practiced on whatever they're picking if they're going down these very abstract routes, things that are maybe more of just the niche counters like a Sandra mid into a LeBlanc, things like that. So it means that there are going to be more windows for potential misplays and really punishing that if you are on comfort.
Yeah, comfort is certainly one element, but when you have a matchup where I think you can say that both these teams are pretty even when it comes to skill. I wouldn't necessarily say one team is dramatically favored in that regard, just by a player diff, because I really don't think there is one. Sometimes in draft, you have to recognize that and say, maybe we can't just check you in a matchup, even if it's comfort. Maybe we need to draft X or Y fallback strategies to say, well, in the case of when it becomes a bit of a stalemate and we go even, we have something in the back that can help us win the game.
And remember, this is the upper bracket, so these teams do have a chance to fall down to the lower bracket if they end up coming in and having a awful performance. And it does mean that for a lot of them, you can almost go in with that overconfidence sometimes, where you can lean one of two ways. If you go towards the comfort, it can be like, well, I played a lot of Xerath, I'm Samj, I'm going to lock it in regardless of what you pick. I don't think they necessarily will, but it's that kind of thing that you could potentially take advantage of your opponent if they do step over the line, step over the boundary of where they are allowed in this first draft phase, and just win off of that comfort. Simultaneously, you could go the other way, where if you get a bit too hand-wavy with what you actually want to pick and you don't have a coherent comp by the end of it, it just takes a volley bear to seal it all together.
It does take a volley bear, but I mean, from what I've seen off a volley bear, it's just as inconsistent as maybe these two teams might be from current recent performances.
Well,
not insinuating anything.
Not insinuating anything. Okay, fair enough. Well, we don't care about their recent matches, we care about their current matches, the one to go now. How have you really felt? Have you done much playing on the 12.8 patch? We are now live on 12.9, but this today is the only one that matters. Did you get much experience seeing the Wukong, seeing things like that firsthand?
I can't say I have, because I've only just kind of come back into actually playing the game properly with the release of the new Aphelios skin, which I'm very pleased about. So if you see anything from me on activity of League of Legends within maybe the next few days, it will probably be that champion.
Understandable. I don't think we'll necessarily see them today. Not exactly the kind of style that we expect from these bot laners of being the main focal point for the squad. Maybe they'll surprise us. At the end of the day, Aphelios was one of those ADCs that got tagged the least out of what was the power 3 of the Jinx Aphelios Zeri. Admittedly, though, we did have Gale Force nerfed, I believe it was 2 patches ago, having that cooldown bumped up. Yeah. So it means that you are a lot less safe, and when these teams are so scrappy, I don't know if you want to be playing a champion that is hinging on a give or take 1.5 minute plus cooldown to stay alive.
And I will say, this does depend on what composition you're into, but in cases where that Gale Force dash might not be quite as useful, it is always useful, don't get me wrong. What you can do nowadays is you can go Bloodline, which is now giving you 100 health. You can then go Shield Bow, which is now giving you health on a Mythic passive, on top of Overgrowth and Conditioning, which ends up making you surprisingly tanky as an ADC, albeit you kind of lose benefits of cut down, so generally you're going either Last Stand or Coup de Grace in these circumstances, but some champions such as Samira can really make use of that.
I love that point, because when you have these almost deceptively tanky ADCs, it does throw off that kind of mental maths that a lot of these players are going to be going into it, particularly if you are locking in things like the burstier champions. Could be something that Hope is maybe not really adjusted to if they are playing one of their assassins. Then for the other side, none really that are jumping out and going, oh, well, you really do need to know the exact DPS. But it does then start to ask the question of where else can we use those rune adaptations, particularly things like in the top lane, where we have somebody like Coco, who I'm expecting to default to the Gwen. On the other side, Spirit, we know they've been playing a bit of Darius. Is that something you will be pulling out right here on the UE Masters stage?
I mean, Coco also plays a bit of Darius himself, so maybe we'll see Darius as a contested pick this game, which would be interesting, to say the least. But anything can happen because it's League of Legends.
That's very true. Anything can happen. Anything can happen with these two teams. For all we know, we might be getting role swaps. I doubt that one. Maybe we can safely put that one to bed on the scale of things. So, don't think we need to focus too much more about the game until we end up heading towards Champion Select. I'm just going to ask you a generic question. How are you doing? Not today, because it's the morning, so I doubt that you've got much to say for that, but how are you doing recently?
Yeah, not been too bad. Kind of just been. I'm kind of finally almost free now for like the rest for the next few months. So at least that's great. Like what on the term of university work, that's kind of died off since Thursday. So that's been nice.
That's got to be everybody starting to reach the end of their almost term and getting past all the coursework goals, things like that. I remember the stress that came along with them. So fair play for that one, and fair play to all the players as well who are somehow managing to juggle comp with their studies. It's always a tough one. Not necessarily because the times typically clash, but because you need to dedicate a lot of time to, obviously, your coursework. Make sure you're studying, everybody. But not more importantly, hold on, I'm going to redact that one before it comes out of my mouth. But equally, you need to make sure that you're dedicating time if you want to be able to compete at this highest level and have any chance in competing with the best of them all across Europe.
Exactly that. It's a high level of play in general. I mean, it's probably the highest level of play that many of these players will ever come to see because, well, it's the highest level of university play. There is not much more to say about that. And it's just impressive, really, that you've made it to this point. And for some people, it's just a matter of just enjoy it.
Exactly. Like, at the end of the day, the atmosphere you get in a team is irreplaceable. You can't match that in any kind of environment. Just having that camaraderie between you. No, you don't necessarily have to be playing on a stage together, while a fair few of these players likely have. I know that the DMU players at least did their most recent finals at the Insomnia Festival, so they would have actually had that experience of playing next to your allies, which really does go towards building that camaraderie even further. Maybe could be a turning point in their consistency, because they looked pretty good across all of those games and then proceeded to 3-0, I believe it was, their following matchup to make their way here. So on a bit of a warpath is DMU right now.
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time to get there, but they got there in the end, and that's what's important. It's the same story for all of these teams. Remember that every single one of these teams at UEM has won their regional league in some fashion. They have been dominant. They have been a dominant factor in their regions, and that is important to mention.
Absolutely, and it's important because if you haven't seen what it's like to win, and you haven't reached that kind of pinnacle, which we know BME have because they qualified in the first place and now they're back again, we can't get rid of them, then as far as it goes, I believe, hold on a moment, we're just getting a bit of news as to what's happening. Apologies to everybody, we have been vamping for a little while, but we are just about to find out what's actually going on.
Yeah, it seems like there's some current issues with DMU in terms of getting into lobby, which means that they're going to be forfeiting their first game, unfortunately.
Okie dokie, that is a rough way to start off a series of not getting to start off the series.
We will be back though once we resolve these issues, and we will be in game for the second game, I suppose. I mean, it does give BME that +1 advantage, but that doesn't mean that Team U's out this by any means. It will just be a short 10-minute break, and then we'll be back to cover the rest of it.